Welcome back to Kleppers Corner. Today in history, the show where we take one random date on the calendar, peel back the wallpaper of human civilization, and discover that underneath it is black mold, a family argument, and at least 6 wars. November 24th isn't a date. It's the world's busiest complaint box. This one square on the calendar contains scientific revolutions, medieval assassinations, hijackings, televised murders, factory fires, landslides, peace deals, and barbed wire. It's a date that wakes up every year and says, what if we change everything forever? And history, like a teenager with a lighter near a fireworks stand, just says, yeah, okay. So let's stroll through November 24th, which has all the subtlety of a jackhammer in a library and twice the body count. Segment 1, Darwin drops the mic. The origin of species changes everything. On November 24th, 1859, Charles Darwin published On the Origin of Species, the book that politely tapped humanity on the shoulder and said, hey champ, you're not special. You're just winning, for now, in a multi-generational cage match against nature. Victorians opened the book expecting a cute story about pigeons and instead got survival of the fittest. Deal with it. It was the 1859 equivalent of finding out your entire family ancestry test comes back labeled, congratulations, you're 98% accident. Darwin called this a short abstract. That's how British men apologize. Sorry, my theory cracked the entire religious foundation of Western civilization. Bit of a bother. The first print run sold out instantly. Faster than Taylor Swift tickets, slower than vaccines during a pandemic, but still impressive. And suddenly everyone was arguing about evolution. Scientists, bishops, chimney sweeps, that one guy at the pub who insists birds aren't real. Darwin was terrified to publish, because nothing says fun scientific breakthrough like risking being excommunicated for noticing finches have different beaks. Segment 2. Lucy shows up and says, actually, we walked before we thought. Fast forward 115 years to November 24th, 1974, when paleoanthropologist Donald Johanson found a 3.2 million-year-old hominin skeleton that would become known as Lucy. Because apparently the Beatles control not only modern music, but early human branding. This was not just a fossil. This was the Beyoncé of paleoanthropology. 40% complete, bipedal, bowl-shaped pelvis, a knee angle that screams, I evolved to walk and I am working it. Lucy's brain was the size of a chimp's, which means she was walking upright long before she was thinking upright. Basically, early humans said, we don't know why we're standing, but we're standing. Intelligence can come later. Maybe. Lucy proved Darwin right. Evolution is not a neat staircase. It's a drunken zigzag toward the vague promise of competence. Segment 3. Oswald gets shot on live TV and America's brain breaks. November 24th, 1963. America already had whiplash from JFK's assassination. Then, Lee Harvey Oswald, the alleged assassin, was being transferred in the basement of the Dallas police station. A basement somehow full of reporters, flashbulbs, and every man in Texas who owned a fedora. And then, nightclub owner Jack Ruby stepped out of the crowd and shot Oswald on live television. The first live broadcast murder in history. It was the moment America collectively realized, oh, this is what news is now. Trauma, but scheduled. Oswald died at the same hospital as JFK, which at that point was basically the world's most depressing revolving door. And his death guaranteed the conspiracy theories would never end. If you whispered magic bullet in 1963, 5 uncles would appear behind you like Beetlejuice. Segment 4. D.B. Cooper jumps into a thunderstorm and into legend. 8 years later, November 24th, 1971, a man in a suit with a tie clip and the swagger of someone who has definitely said, keep the change, hijacks a plane, asks for $200,000 and 4 parachutes, and then jumps out the back of a Boeing 727 into a rainstorm. This is peak American crime. polite, stylish, and absolutely reckless. He left behind a tie, cigarette butts, and enough mystery to fuel 53 years of documentaries, Reddit threads, and men named Tucker who own metal detectors. Evidence washed up in a river in 1980. The FBI quit in 2016 out of exhaustion. And then, in 2024 and 2025, new clues emerged, including a parachute and harness that might tie Cooper to Richard McCoy II, another hijacker who basically said, "What if I did the same crime again, but worse?" If this pans out, the D.B. Cooper legend might finally end. Or, knowing America, we'll just replace him with a new one made entirely of AI speculation and people in flannel arguing at craft breweries. Segment 5. The Battle Above the Clouds. When weather helped defeat the Confederacy. Back in 1863, November 24th saw one of the most cinematic battles of the Civil War. Lookout Mountain, the so-called Battle Above the Clouds. Fog rolled in halfway up the mountain, so soldiers fighting couldn't even see the valley below, and the Valley Army couldn't see who was winning. It was basically a Civil War live stream with a buffering problem. Union forces climbed a mountain, punched through Confederate lines, and planted a flag so high it could have doubled as a weather report. This victory opened the door to Sherman's march and the unraveling of the Confederacy. So, yes, weather helped defeat traitors. This is the rare moment in history when fog did something useful besides delaying flights. Segment 6. Bombers, Access Alliances, and the discovery of the jet stream. November 24th also features World War II doing what it does best, reshaping continents with poor decision-making and heavy machinery. First, in 1940, Slovakia joined the Axis. This was not a quirky membership club. This was a horrifying alignment that paved the way for deportations and mass murder. Bureaucracy signed the paper, human beings paid the price. Then, in 1944, the U.S. launched the first major B-29 raid on Tokyo from the Marianas. The mission failed, not because of Japanese defenses, but because the planes ran into the jet stream, a meteorological phenomenon so strong it literally blew bombs off target. Nothing quite like discovering global atmospheric science by noticing your explosives keep missing things. This failure led to low-altitude incendiary bombing, the raids that would eventually reduce huge swaths of Tokyo to ashes. November 24th, the day war met weather, and weather said, "Oh, you thought you were in control?" Segment 7, Vietnam, POWs, and policy pivots. November 24th, 1963 wasn't just Oswald's murder. It was also the day President Johnson quietly began steering the Vietnam War onto a new track. Publicly, he repeated Kennedy's cautious approach. Privately, he signaled escalation. It was the diplomatic equivalent of saying, "I'm not touching the thermostat," while actively turning it to sauna. That same day in South Vietnam, First Sergeant Kenneth Rohraback was captured, later executed, and became one of many POWs whose stories reveal the brutal, grinding reality of the conflict beneath the geopolitical chessboard. Segment 8. Medieval assassins, monster mountains, and a battle that killed a king. November 24th in the Middle Ages was pure chaos. In 1227, Polish dukes gathered for a political meeting that turned into a surprise murder bath. Literally, Leszek the White was attacked while bathing. Medieval politics were basically the Real Housewives, but with fewer wine glasses and more daggers. Then, in 1248, Mont Grenier collapsed. Half a mountain suddenly decided gravity was optional and flattened entire villages. Up to 5,000 people died. Medieval chroniclers said it was God's anger. Geologists say it was limestone failure. Honestly, given human history, it was probably both. Then, in 1542, England stomped Scotland at the Battle of Solway Moss, with such force that King James V reportedly died of embarrassment weeks later. Imagine losing a war so badly your body says, "Nope, we're out." Segment 9. Barbed wire and the death of the open range. In 1874, Joseph Glidden patented barbed wire, also known as the Devil's Rope, which sounds like something a megachurch would sell as merch. This invention ended the open frontier, launched 1,000 property disputes, and eventually became standard equipment for trench warfare and concentration camps. Humanity looked at a tool designed to poke cows and said, but what if we use it on each other? Nothing captures the American spirit like inventing something to manage cattle and then immediately weaponizing it. Segment 10, the Tazreen factory fire and the price of cheap clothes. On November 24, 2012, the Tazreen Fashions factory in Bangladesh caught fire, killing at least 112 workers. Exits were locked. Flammable materials were stored everywhere. Global retailers pretended to be shocked, despite emails showing they knew fixes were not financially feasible. Translation: human lives are expensive. Profit isn't. It was one of the clearest, most horrifying examples of how the global clothing supply chain works. Maximum style, minimum safety, and absolutely zero regard for the people sewing the seams. Segment 11. Freddie Mercury leaves the stage. On November 24, 1991, Freddie Mercury died. A legend, a voice like a laser beam coated in velvet, a performer who turned stadiums into living organisms. His death from AIDS complications shattered the silence in rock culture about the epidemic. When Freddie spoke, finally, people listened. And when he died, the world was forced to acknowledge a crisis that too many had ignored. Segment 12. Colombia signs a peace deal 50 years in the making. Finally, November 24, 2016, the Colombian government and the FARC signed a peace deal that ended a 50-year civil war. The first referendum failed because, of course, the public said no to a plan that might actually stop killing. But the revised agreement passed through Congress because sometimes politicians do the thing voters won't. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't unanimously loved, but it ended a conflict that shaped generations. That's November 24th. Messy, complicated, historically exhausting, but progress nonetheless. In conclusion, November 24th is not a date so much as a pressure point on the spine of world history. Press here, and humanity yelps. This day gave us evolution and evidence, war and weather, murders in basements and legends in the sky, kings dying of humiliation and rock stars dying of courage. It gave us barbed wire to divide the world and peace deals attempting to stitch it back together. November 24th is a reminder that history doesn't move in straight lines. It lurches, stumbles, leaps, collapses, hijacks a plane, publishes a masterwork, and occasionally crushes a valley under a mountain. And somehow, through all that, we keep going. Tune in next time when another innocent date reveals it too has been complicit in human madness.